Okay. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another whatever the hell type of podcast Samson is doing, which is the interim name for all this stuff. Joined by a good friend, uh, mentor of the past,
God.
perhaps, Blake Murphy. Blake, there's a lot of WWE questions that you and I have to get
Yeah.
to. So I just want, how you
Do we
doing?
have to? Because I only looked through a couple of them, and a handful are fine, but one, I think your audience will revolt if we do too many. And two, I did not sit down for 2 hours and think of who every best wrestler from
Yeah.
every. There's a lot of similar themed questions.
So we'll start.
Excited to do a couple of them though.
We'll start here just to tease it because obviously that's the back end of the podcast. But to honor co-host Trevon, did Triple H waste the briefcase last night? And if you can think of it, what is the briefcase like? What is the briefcase in the NBA? Is there anything similar to it?
So I've actually had this idea before, and you obviously couldn't do it; it would be too stupid. But so for anyone who doesn't know, the briefcase is once a year you can win. You have to get into the ladder match, and then 6 guys will fight, or 6 women will fight. If you climb the ladder and get a briefcase at the top, you win what's called Money in the Bank. And for 1 year, at any time, you can cash that in for a title shot, a shot at the champ. So my idea when they rolled out the in-season tournament is that it should be it should be a Money in the Bank briefcase. Oh, guess what? The Boston Celtics just fought a 5-game series and won. That final buzzer goes. The Indiana Pacers music hits. They can come out and challenge the champs. It's like a double elimination almost. It becomes in the NBA, where it's like, okay, we get a shot at the champs now. So that's what I think the NBA equivalent could be. Did he waste it? No, I don't think so. So I won't spoil it for anyone who hasn't watched yet, but I think it's in service of a couple different storylines, so it's fine. And also, if SummerSlam goes the way that I think it's going to go, you're going to come out of that with 2 really, really strong champions who weren't going to lose for a long time anyway. So you don't necessarily need it as a booking device. Plus, you still have the women's, so you still got the women's to roll with.
Okay. I was checking Instagram and I saw you and Trey were both there, and I was like, "Oh, cool."
I didn't know he was there.
Yeah. He was very excited to go to it. I just played basketball with him this morning. He was like, he pulled the tickets kind of late. But for those people who are listening, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I went with some friends, but I also went with Chris LaRue, the Blue Jays color analyst on radio, which was a lot of fun. Managed to, at the last minute, score some Sportsnet hookups that, our relationship with WWE is ending at the end of this calendar year.
Right.
So I didn't know if we'd be able to pull it off. But yeah, cashed in that final Money in the Bank for myself.
There it was. You used the briefcase properly.
Yes.
For anybody who is wondering about if this is a wrestling podcast or a basketball one, yes, basketball. Myself and Blake are here to talk about kind of the team building stuff, how the Raptors have been going about it over the past, couple weeks via the draft, via free agency. And we've got the juiciest summer league roster in some time to poke around on. And then I guess 40 or so questions from listeners, which we will not be getting to all of them. Blake, the first thing I want to talk to you about, I guess, is big picture. The Raptors, a lot of guys come through in the draft. They make the subtle moves in free agency of just hey, we're going to re-sign our guys. We're going to throw a big bag at a couple of our guys who are cornerstones. Garrett Temple comes back. Bruce Brown, they confirm the contract. Big picture takeaways. What's the early thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think the early indication from them, and the Bruce Brown thing kind of signaled this, but also their moves on draft night, is they looked at this free agent landscape. They looked at, this would have been the first time they've had actual cap space since 2015 when they got Damari Carroll. I know that there was a narrative out there that the Raptors don't attract free agents, and that is true, but it's also partly true because they've never operated as a below salary cap team. So they've just whiffed on mid-levels and stuff like that. Having said that, that decision to, their draft night stuff signaled this, the taking on Davion Mitchell and Sasha Vezenkov as hey, we're going to rent out some of our cap space to pick up a couple second round picks. You get 45, which turns into Jamal Shed. You get a 2025 second from Portland. That should be pretty spicy in a year where the Raptors don't have their own second. So, now you're looking at, you've got full control of your first. You've got a mediocre team second. You're in a pretty good shape. And then you're at a pick positive moving forward because of that extra Indy first that's coming back. And they looked at that, and that signaled to me that they weren't going to be a cap space team. They weren't going to decline Bruce Brown and let him walk and renounce the rights to Gary and take advantage of Emmanuel Quickly's smaller cap hold and be a free agent player. And I can understand some of that. I've tried to set this up over the course of the year that, being a cap flexible team, being a team with cap space is not always as sexy as you go out and sign Kevin Durant. A lot of times it is you rent out your cap space, and what that ends up getting you is 2 decent second round picks and a year to see if you can get more out of it. Can you turn Davion Mitchell into Markelle Fultz? Like that's what they got out of that chunk of cap space. And I'm okay with that. I like that kind of move. I think it's, smart if you don't think you can attract a free agent or whatever. However, there is a limit to that. And who knows, maybe there's maybe we're going to find out tomorrow at Masai's presser with Scotty and Emmanuel Quickly that there is a Bruce Brown trade, and this is going to sound silly. But to me, they have, I think, misread the Bruce Brown play. And, we can go back to the trade deadline. There was conflicting reports about whether or not a first was on the table. I think, that was probably the time to move him, because if you're going to sell him, then this team gets 2 playoff runs with Bruce Brown. Or, hey, you want to talk about all the value of the optionality in his contract or whatever. Well, then a team gets 1 playoff run with Bruce Brown and all that optionality of the contract or whatever the term is.
Yeah.
So I think maybe they missed and who knows, maybe the offers were just like a pair of seconds or something like that, and they thought they could do better and they didn't end up. But when you take that $23 million contract and you look at the way the economics of the NBA have worked out this offseason, where the middle class has basically not existed, right? I don't know that there's going to be a huge Bruce Brown market. Who knows? Maybe someone who's on a $25 million deal with multiple years left gets hurt this year, and you can take on a bad contract to send Bruce Brown out. Things change. There are 6 months before the trade deadline still, but the way it looks right this second is that they've put a value on the flexibility of that Bruce Brown option and that Bruce Brown asset, and the league economics, especially for contending teams, are such that Bruce Brown doesn't have a ton of value. And look, it's not like Bruce Brown's 35. He's going to be on this roster and be a decent player, and he'll almost, I would bet now, he will play better than he played with the Raptors last year. Like, He was clearly dealing with a knee thing and some transient, I don't know if I'm here long term. Who am I? Where am I? Kind of thing. Creeped out by podcasters getting little cactus Bruce Brown tattoos.
Yeah.
All sorts of stuff like that. However, there's a real opportunity cost to this, right? Like, unless they're able to, at the deadline, turn around and cash Bruce Brown in for a first or a decent prospect or something like that, it's going to look to me like they punted on the opportunity. And again, I don't think they were going to be a big go get $30 million of cap space spent on a star. And who knows? Maybe James Wiseman isn't that much for Indiana. Maybe it doesn't work out. Maybe, Patrick Williams on a 5-year 90 ends up being the Patrick Williams we've seen, not the Patrick Williams we hope he's going to be. Maybe whatever deal Markelle Fultz signs for, and he's a bit redundant after the Davion Mitchell thing, but say you like Markelle Fultz, say you like Mo Wagner, whoever the guy is, what the Bruce Brown option took you out of the market for is trying on one of those guys and taking a flyer. And when you're buying in that tier of guy, more often than not, it does turn into Jalen McDaniels, right? Maybe not that bad, but like it doesn't work out. But in, valuing the flexibility of the Bruce Brown asset, I do think at a time where the priority should be get young talent in the door, get young talent in the door, get young talent in the door, they sacrificed a little bit of that in service of, like, once again, hey, let's roll over the asset. Let's maintain that flexibility. This is a long-winded way of saying it was a fairly underwhelming offseason. I get what they were doing. I think the Bruce Brown part of that execution is probably something that they will look back on and say, yeah, all that rolling flexibility wasn't worth it.
A couple things. So CJ McCollum and Grant Williams combining together to honor Ronald Reagan, and you rode the middle class of the NBA. And secondly, the word around the deadline and leading up to it was that the Raptors canvassed the league for Buddy Hield and Bruce Brown's prospective value. And they decided that Buddy, especially with looming extension or contract talks, his expectations were quite large, so they weren't going to go that way, really. And Bruce Brown, they thought there would be a lot more motion, and there just hasn't been. And so we're left in this position where I guess they decided maybe Bruce on a team, a healthier Raptors team that could make use of him for sure, he might be able to play himself into, let's say, a deal at the deadline or something of that sort, because nothing has materialized just yet. As Aubrey Losoho says, it would be odd to see or to be an NBA player having your future discussed by two fellas like myself and Blake, but you have to hope that Bruce Brown is not tapped in. However, he might be, because Hoop Goose retweeted this
Yeah.
and he's he's paying attention. What I want to ask though, Blake, is we're looking at a team, and you're the guy for the past however many years that everybody's like, oh, this guy pays attention to the 905. He knows all the little cap, like he knows how the cap minutia. He knows a lot more about the players at the lower levels than everyone else. When you look at this team that has just brought in a whole bunch of guys who could impact at the G League level and kind of create a healthier and more proficient pipeline from big team to small team, how do you feel about that aspect of the offseason?
Yeah, I mean, that aspect of it is cool, right? Like, this is, again, like they need to be in young talent acquisition mode, and that's not as easy as, in a league where it takes you 4 years after you're drafted to hit free agency, and even then it's restricted free agency. It's usually not going to be go out and sign a guy. It's trade for a guy who hasn't worked out somewhere, and one of the reasons that I'm a proponent of second round picks, and I didn't love like when the Raptors would attach, a couple seconds in the Acapurtle trade, or, the championship year, absolutely they're going for the title, but they attached 2 or 3 second round picks to unload salary to get out of to lower the luxury tax hit. And that has a big long-term cost. Like a lot of times, yeah, you come out of the draft and it's like, okay, you got DeJuan Hernandez, or, the one year that after the Tampa tank, they got David Johnson and Delano Banton. And like Delano Banton just being an NBA player is a really good outcome for the 45th or 46th pick. These guys are not always going to blow you away, but one of the reasons that I like having more second round picks is if you're in this kind of talent acquisition mode, if we're in the era where you have 18 roster spots, the 905 are well established and things like that, and you're a good player development team, you should be taking more kicks at the can. Like I've pushed back a couple times over the years on like, oh, actually, a first round pick isn't as valuable to the Raptors because they draft so well later, or they don't need as many second round picks because they do well in undrafted. But to me, it's like, if you're good at that stuff, you should want more opportunities to do it and better opportunities to do it. So I'm really excited for that. I think the 905 are better established than the results from the last couple of years suggest. I think last year, they were just rinsed with injuries. They still led the G League in guys who got called up to the NBA. Javon was pretty good. Jonte Porter, sorry how that went, Guy, but you were a success story there for a little bit.
A Rico case, man. Everyone thought the Raptors were going to get caught up in that Knicks case. That was the little thing.
Yeah.
The Jonte thing is the big one.
It's crazy. When we find out about the betting scandal for like the yard games, it's like, hey, man, I had a pack of cigs on that game and you botched a free throw on purpose. That's going to be ugly. No, sincerely, I hope he's doing okay and that turns out well. But yeah, anyway, 905 stuff. I'm really excited. Like that summer league roster's fun. Jama coaching that team is going to be great.
Ooh, Timmy, that's pretty gnarly.
Yeah, it's a pretty good team. He's looked good for Sacramento in this Cali Classic as well.
I do. Let's go back to the draft quickly, because I know you've probably done a lot more film afterwards and probably dove into some of the stats. Did anyone's profile or film pop out to you like, ooh, this is starting to get really, really exciting?
Yeah, I weirdly, like, Jacoby's probably the one guy that I'm like, I just knew enough about him already, and everyone, like, the consensus from you guys and the draft people being like, yeah, that's fine. That makes sense. I dug in a little bit more on the second round guys. I love Mobo. Like I absolutely, I know he's a 6'6" big, and this team is not always, we don't need to run pick and roll below the free throw line to make up for the undersize and the lack of shooting and stuff like that. But like, I think his path to being a useful energy bench piece is like pretty straightforward. They know how to develop that kind of guy. I think, Jamal Shed is going to like I've got a 905 replica ring on that bookshelf over there. I'm getting another one. Like, I know that, look, he's going to get minutes at point guard at some point this year. Like, they're giving him a guaranteed NBA contract, not a two-way. So he'll be in the mix there, but like, yeah, he's getting me another 905 title. I'm excited for that. And then Shamshi is like, I don't know. I'm not the first person to say this, but it really does feel like they're like what if we did a redo on Bruno, but like the number 57 pick instead of number 20, and we have the 905 now, like toolsy, incredibly raw. Like I kind of, no one has confirmed this to me, but like him being in summer league and the other seconds having been signed already and him not being signed, I wonder if they're looking at, maybe stash him for a year and then use the second round pick exception to bring him in on a multi. Because like one of the issues with like if you two-way him, that's probably necessary for his development, but you're an RFA after 1 year, maybe 2 years. And like it's probably not a big deal. Like worry about it when you get there and stuff like that. But this idea of he's so raw, he's so young, youngest player in the draft, I think, right?
Either that or second youngest. I can't remember.
But like, okay, go, stay another year, play in the BAL or wherever is comfortable for you or whatever. And then we'll use that second round pick exception to bring you in next year when we have fewer rookies coming in the door. Like, I just think there are some cool options there. And, it's going to be a long-term one though.
You might be onto something though, because that is why it's important that they used the pick. Like they basically paid $1 million to go get like ultimate flexibility on Chauncey.
If they sign him to a two-way, they really paid that $1 million for not a lot.
Yeah.
Whereas if he were to be stashed or they eventually sign him to the Jamal Shed, Jonathan Mobo contract, it's a little less useful.
Yeah. I do wonder what happens with him. It is like the only way to see him really is with that synergy subscription and go sort by play types. And okay, now I'm poking around. Now I'm seeing what's happening. There's a lot of athleticism. I do like that you brought up Bruno, except like it wasn't as big as an opportunity. And also Bruno, just because I watched him recently, FIBA, he's turned into such a good FIBA player. And he was last year.
Dude, he has like top end EuroLeague teams fighting over him. Like he's saying KK Partizan like didn't pay him his money and he wants to be free. And then who is it? I think Maccabi Tel Aviv is like trying to get him back now. But like there's a dispute of like EuroLeague teams are like fighting over Bruno, and he's going to the Olympics as like a huge rim protecting center. It's that doesn't mean like why that pick didn't work out was because like it was the number 20 pick and they didn't have the 905 yet. Like the opportunity cost and the ability to execute it wasn't there. But the idea in theory is not that bad.
And the smaller floor, it makes him bigger than life too. He's just, there's so much utility in that smaller floor. The foot speed stuff or fluidity stuff doesn't stick as much. Very interesting. I do kind of want, or Mel just asked right here quickly, your thoughts on Sasha Vezenkov. We'll talk about this because there's conflicting reports. Our guy, Michael Grange, Mikey, he says the Raptors have no plans, as far as what I've heard latest, have no plans to have Sasha leave. Whereas there's like Olympiacos is saying this guy on our roster soon. He's a former EuroLeague MVP, Sasha Vezenkov. Have you heard anything? Is there anything interesting?
No, I don't know how much I am actually supposed to say about like agent relationships and stuff like that, but like his agent went dark on me after this stuff. Because it's an agent who's like had other Raptors in the past. But like, yeah, I can't get an answer right now. And I'm sure like this is going to come up at the presser tomorrow, almost certainly. Best read on it is probably he would like to go and the Raptors need a reason to make it happen. Right. Like I think they definitely acquired him knowing this was a possibility and something that he wanted. Now, we also know Sasha has a relationship with Darko. So to what extent that is, the Raptors trying to convince him that this is a good opportunity for him versus the Raptors playing hardball. So for anyone who doesn't know, they can't just like waive Sasha, let him go back and like get the cap space. They'd have to agree to a buyout. Vezenkov would have to leave money on the table for the Raptors to get a cap benefit and things like that. So probably a lot of this is just posturing from either side. But yeah, I've got nothing material from a reporting standpoint, just like how it looks from afar. We've gone through this. Who was it? There was someone last year or the year before as well who was we went through this again, and I can't remember who it was, but like this is not the first time this has happened in the last couple of years.
That's there. I think the simplest way is if it's a big buyout, he leaves everything on the table. But that's a lot of money for the EuroLeague, and that's probably not entirely likely, like the whole thing.
And so what a lot of Greek fans and Greek media who DM us a lot or reply to us a lot would say is, well, the Olympiacos deal is net of taxes. So once you factor in Canadian taxes and stuff like that, and the fact that it's a 4-year deal, maybe then it ends up making more sense. Oh, I think it was Svi. I think this happened with Svi.
Yes, it did. Yeah. I do wonder, do you know off the top of your head if they get a full buyout, cap exceptions come in or whatever, what are they working with? Like 11 or 12 million?
Yeah, like enough to use the mid-level if Gary's not back. And then I have to double check because like the second round pick exception is nice. And it lets you sign those guys and like maintain RFA after 3 years and stuff like that. But they gave both Mobo and Shed more than the minimum. So that eats into a little bit of our projected tax space as well. So I'll have to double check. I'd imagine they could get pretty close to using the full mid-level, like enough to say use the mid-level. Whether that ends up actually being like 8 or 9 million instead, I'd also imagine they'll want to leave a little bit of flexibility for like, to go back to the Bruce Brown example, say at the trade deadline you need to take 25 mil back instead of 23 mil. You want to have that little bit of flexibility. Also,
in case something, kicks off, like there's a kicker in somebody's contract or something like that. Unlikely kicker, maybe.
So, and the Raptors do have a lot of that. The Raptors have, I think, 3.4 million in unlikely incentives. RJ's got a ton. And then I think Jakob has $500,000 in incentives as well. I should have had my spreadsheet handy for this, but yeah, I think they've got about 3.4 million in unlikelies as a team. This is also like, this is going to be, I think we're going to see this as like a trickle down effect of the second apron stuff, because like your unlikely bonuses don't count for the salary cap, but they count toward the apron because like that CBA assumes guys will hit it. So you can't loophole guys by making these incentives that get them in the back door after. So I think we're going to see fewer of those in contracts.
Interesting. Before we get to the team building aspect and kind of what the Raptors are trying to do stylistically, which is to me the most interesting conversation right now, Gary Trent Jr. has been maybe not long tenured Raptor, but like medium tenured Raptor, and he may or may not be returning to the team. You and I had talked a little bit before the season was over. Everything seemed to be pointing that way. Like Gary is probably not coming back. The market has been really tough. We talked about like the guys in the middle of the salary cap. It's tough to find spots. Players who I think I perceive to be better than Gary took like 9, 10, $11 million contracts. What do you make of the Gary Trent situation? And then we'll do some team building, etc.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair read on it. And like before, before the Lakers kind of locked everything in and became a team tight to the second apron, I thought maybe we were headed for like the KCP Malik Monk clutch special of like, hey, 1 year deal it here, and then your value will be, so good after this. So I'm a little surprised that no one's gone to like the mid-level for him. But part of, I can't remember if this was with you or with someone else when I was, out creeping on you doing another podcast or something like that. But like part of why when there were talks of Gary's extension number or whatever, I just couldn't get it is that like, I like Gary. He showed me a lot this year. I've talked about how kind of, I came out of this season more positive about Gary than I came in. But the reality is that like, if you're pinching pennies, if you're finding somewhere to cut, then that's the player type you do it on, like a more, mono skilled guy where obviously shooting is incredibly valuable, but like there were shooters in the draft. There are shooters in the G League. There's, you can acquire that guy with the mid-level, right? Like, so that's why I had a little trouble with some of the like, oh, Gary could get 20 million that we had at the start of the season or whatever. I'm surprised it's dried out this much though. And I do wonder if the Raptors knew just how dry it would be, would they have chose to, instead of keeping the Bruce Brown team option and rolling with that, re-signing Gary Trent to a multi-year at a lower number, and then maybe he's the trade asset they're talking about rolling over for flexibility, a little younger, he's still a shooter. I don't know. I'm a little surprised it's dried up to this one. I thought the mid-level would have been Gary's floor.
Yeah, I thought I guess, that makes a little bit of sense. As Cody says, the mystical Chris Haynes report. Yeah, a lot of us were confused when that came out. It was like, this doesn't make a lick of sense to me. Although reporting is difficult and you try and get like every fact straight. But I thought the mid-level you qualify with who you can, you get it right with who you can, and stuff still doesn't come out in the wash. That's reporting. However, Gary is really interesting because, as you say, could he be the chip at the trade deadline? He was a chip last trade deadline, no one bit. And even the trade deadline before that was in play. And I think what has happened is that the shooting is less motion than a lot of people initially thought. The defense has tailed off from where people might have thought it was. And even if there was like a front office executive who really liked watching him blow up for like 30-point games on occasion, that person is probably softened on Gary as Gary's gotten older. And so he just had like, and good thing he signed that 3-year 54. I think just his perception around the league has softened so much. And then this happens with players all the time. Gary could very well be worth the middle-level exception. It's just that like you can kind of ping pong back and forth. Some players suddenly like they're the hottest thing around. Like Gabe Vincent was, oh, this is like the sexy backup point guard. And then it was like, okay. And Gary could go from being like a sexy, this guy could maybe do something on a big contract to now he goes really low. He might bounce back up.
Yeah, Jared Vanderbilt, same kind of thing. I think we're going to see with, I think Luke Kennard's still free agent right now, right? Like he's kind of in a similar situation.
I guess we'll see. But the big thing that makes it easy to look past Gary Trent Jr. and to the future of the Toronto Raptors is the fact that Emmanuel Quickley is like a tremendous three-point shooter. That Grady Dick is a tremendous three-point shooter. If anybody wants to know just how good, you can go to raptorsrepublic.com, or you can watch the video essay I did on his movement shooting, which was really fantastic. Jacoby Walter is a jitterbug trying to get to different spots on the floor to get loose for three-point shooting. Ochai Agbaji, I'm sure, like he shot 21% with the Raptors last year from three, but I'm sure the Raptors can sell themselves on, well, if he shoots like 34, 35% on catch and shoots and plays point of attack defense, we take that, and that's not that far from Utah. There's a bunch of things.
He hasn't been allowed to leave the corner all summer. That's it. He hasn't left the corner of the court. Like you watch the Canada basketball videos, back in some corner shooting is Ochai.
It's a necessity. He's not big enough to play on the inside. And go ahead.
I was just going to ask you a question. Were you surprised to see him on the Summer League roster? Like, obviously, developmentally, he needs it, but a third-year guy who was a 4-year at a major program, like, he's among the most experienced players to, like, ever play in Summer League now, really.
It confuses me a little bit because it's pretty clear what swings this for Ochai. Because he can pick up, he can guard, and I really don't think that there's any expectations from the Raptors brass or coaching staff that he's going to need more possessions to kind of build out his pick and roll craft, maybe his guard screen craft. I'm not really sure, but it seems like the big thing for Ochai is just like in your fourth year in Kansas, and your third and fourth year, you shot like 39% on almost 7 attempts per game from three between the 2 years. That has to happen at the NBA level. That's a huge part of why you were drafted. And we're looking for that to happen. What benefit he gets from Summer League, I'm not entirely sure, but I think it does speak to like a commitment to the Raptors and the program, and probably a humility to go there and participate in that way. I was surprised to see him there because, as you said, immediately in my brain, I was like, well, he was 4 years at Kansas. He's going into year 3. This is fairly abnormal. And this is more like, it's not a surprise that JFL is there. JFL is trying to cut his teeth and get into the league.
Right.
Ochai is a lottery pick. Like he's still on the lottery contract. He still gets paid pretty well. You know, it is interesting. What were your thoughts?
Which is like at the same time as like, wow, it's surprising to see him there, but also like, yeah, man, you better go. Like if we tell you to go, you better go. So anyway, sorry to switch roles and ask you, but yeah, I was pretty surprised to see him on there, even though I was hoping he would be.
I do wonder how it's going to be for Grady as well, because kind of similar to what we saw with the 905, Grady was better with the Raptors than he was with like down in the G League because this is a shooter first and foremost. And
I think that's part of why they loaded up the Summer League roster. Like,
oh, there you go.
I think they want, like, obviously you want to have a good Summer League roster because you want to have a good Summer League roster. But there is something to like, you want the guys you're trying to evaluate playing in NBA context. Like you want, Grady especially, you want DJ Carton fighting to keep that two-way in an NBA environment, not just throwing, like if DJ Carton only runs a pick and roll with Shamshi the whole summer league, like you're probably not getting great information there. So you want these guys, playing in as close to at least a G League environment as you can, I think, to evaluate them properly.
That was down in Vegas last year. Like Marquise Noel was the most fun player on the Raptors summer league squad. They signed Javon after he kind of like boogied on him via Chicago, and Grady had a tough summer league. Like there was Moses Brown. There was not a lot to watch. I guess Mamadou was pretty good. Like he had a fun summer league to some degree, but there wasn't a ton to watch. There will be more to watch this year. And I do like the point you make about like kind of padding out the roster so that Grady can play a more fixed role. But I also wonder what role Grady plays as a creator down at Summer League and what that looks like.
Yeah.
I also want to see how big he is.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he's listed at 200. So we'll see. Wouldn't mind him pushing 205. Let's get up to light heavyweight here. You're 6'7", so let's see it. That'll be fun to see. Jacoby too, right? Like it's only a couple weeks from the draft, but I'd imagine that's one of the things they told him too. Like you're gonna play NBA level defense, you probably need another 10, 12 pounds here in time. But yeah, and I think there's such a good mix on this. I'm such a like mark for summer league anyway, and I'm sad that I don't get to go down there anymore. But like it's kind of a good mix of like, okay, 4 guys who are carryovers from last year, 2 of whom are playing for their jobs in Carton and JFL. 4 guys who are new 5 guys who are new via the draft or undrafted free agents, because Brendan Carlson, who signed as a 2-way, is going to be there as well. And then you've got 2 other guys who are probably earmarked for 905, and we might not see a ton of in Quincy and Omari Moore. And then a couple guys who are like the standard, like, I don't know. I call them the Jordan Lloyd type, where it's like you're probably not playing your way onto a roster now, but if you are getting teams aware of you and then you're going over to Europe and have a good season, maybe you're 1 season away. Maybe you're like that. Jordan Lloyd did 2 summer leagues with the Raptors before he got a 2-way deal. Matt Morgan's trying to do that who was with the 905 before, trying to do that with the Hornets now. So that's more like, you look at a Jamison Battle, a Tyler Perry or whatever. That's kind of what those guys are doing. It's a really fun mix.
Yeah, it's kind of like your point, too, that you make about quadruple A players. You get to figure out if you're in that group, like Drew Timme maybe is a quadruple A type guy, or if you can ascend past it, which some players do.
It's funny, like Summer League is almost if you created quadruple A.
Sure, yeah.
Like, well, there's triple A, there's major leagues, and there's nothing, you never get to play. And then they're like, oh, what if we made a league in the offseason where you find out?
Yeah. You have been pretty good at picking up on the G League guys who will find success, just because I think people will be like, DJ Carton, I've heard that name before. Yes, the shortest possible cup of coffee with the Raptors due to injury. When you poked around on him back at that time, I remember doing these live streams after games and after he gets signed. There were a lot of people who thought like, ooh, I actually like this guy better than Javon, that he was a pretty interesting player for some people. What do you make of him? Are you excited at all?
Yeah, I mean, I have a thing for Marquette guys, first of all. So I like that about him. He's also, and this is like the G League dork in me, but he has a very similar story to like a Paul Watson or an Isaiah Hartenstein of like, it took a couple years in the G League to figure it out. Like he was a G League bench player and then a G League starter. And then a third time through the G League, he got good enough to get on the, back on the NBA radar. I won't say on the NBA radar because he played at Ohio State and Marquette. You're on the NBA radar at those, but he took a little bit to figure it out. And in poking around, like, look, the biggest thing is going to be he out of nowhere became a 43% 3-point shooter. If that's a real skill, boom, you're a bench NBA player, right? We'll see if that sustains. And like it tailed off a little bit later in the.
I think he can guard is the big thing.
Yeah, and like he's got a little bit, like he's got. One of the reasons I think people liked him relative to JFL is he has like he's actually a point guard. JFL's an undersized shooting guard, right? Like he's a slasher and an offensive rebounder, and that's a fun player type. But last year, like he was not in a great position having to play actual point guard. Like him and Jamias Ramsey splitting point guard duties. Those guys are 6'2" shooting guards. Yeah. So that's it with Carton. And then the other thing, this is a story I want to write at some point, but I haven't gotten to know DJ Carton yet because he spent the whole Raptors time hurt. But in asking around, he's a guy that some of the off-court stuff clicked for him as well. Some of the like maturity stuff, like you look, oh, he bounced around college programs. Nobody touched him after the draft. He's bounced around G League programs. Is there a red flag there? And it really does seem like from talking to people, there's been some learning there. There's been some maturing off the court. Obviously, everyone only really cares about what he does on the court, but sometimes that can free you up, right? Sometimes that can make you a better teammate. Take stuff off your plate that you're focusing on when you're developing and stuff like that. So I got to dig in more when I get to know him, but I think that's a part of his story if he makes it too.
Ochai put him on the mewing and self-improvement plan going forward.
I still don't exactly know what you mean by that, but you use the term all the time. Is that something to do with the jawline? Is that is that a different thing?
Yeah, that's what it is. It's well, I don't actually want to dive too deep into it because it's like adjacent to things that are non-desirable. However, so anyway, Tenzin says here, will Raptors players still go to the Rico Hines run? I think the suggestions were that the Raptors' new home is more likely Miami rather than LA now, with Scotty, RJ, and Emmanuel all kind of signaling that they'd be spending time there just for that. And then John Hamilton bringing up that Timmy is playing for the Kings. Don't know why he's listed on the Raptors roster. That's just for the California Classic. Yeah. He'll be playing for the Raptors Summer League team in Vegas. So that's all fun.
Also, like as a heads up, these things sometimes change. Like there is a possibility where Timmy is so good with the Kings and the Kings, having made some trades here, go to his agent and say like, look, we're really interested in you in a two-way. If you got to go to the Raptors, we get it, but like we'd like to see more of you. This like once or twice a year, a guy who was the one the other year, Raleigh Alkins, was on the Raptors Summer League team and actually like had signed an Exhibit 10 and then ended up going to Chicago instead. He still played Summer League with the Raps, but he went and signed with Chicago instead. 2 years ago, one of the the Mosai was on the Raptors Summer League team and then pulled out. So like these things do change, and it's not always like a mistake or anything like that. It's just like, hey, like a team, the Raptors aren't going to play. If Drew Timmy comes to them and is like, hey, I think the Kings, are going to sign me to a two-way. If I have a good Vegas with them, would you let me out of my Vegas deal? The Raptors aren't going to play hardball on that. So right now Raptors, he's doing both. But.
They took Terrence Davis from the Nuggets. They took Javon from Chicago, and like a team, if you want to keep a guy around, you kind of have to ante up on the other side. And if you don't plan to, then nobody really cares, right? It's like there's a bunch of Summer League guys coming through, and if you wouldn't just like a guy just because of Summer League, you would have prior information on him. He'd be somebody you're watching.
The Terrence Davis example, like he was in the mix for them at 59 when they took DeJuan Hernandez, and Terrence Davis's camp had like told people like Fred VanVleet style, like let me slide, I don't want a two-way, I'm playing for a contract. And it turns out they gave DeJuan a contract anyway. Maybe it would have worked out, but like when they added O'Shea Brissett after, he was in the mix for them at 59. So like, this is where all the pre-draft stuff, when you see like 70 different names on Hoop Rumors or whatever that worked out for the Raptors, like this is part of why too, not every guy is going to be a draft pick or agree to sign with you as an undrafted free agent. But who knows, maybe after Summer League, maybe after 15 good games in the G League or something like that.
This allows, I think, a decent segue, since we're talking about these young guys. The Raptors are going younger. They're building around Scotty Barnes, I think. I do wonder, just like, and a quick thing too, like O'Shea, Terrence Davis, they're not just those two, but the Raptors, even when you look at the guys that they're interested in, there's a pretty high hit rate of like NBA contracts there. So even as the Raptors have struggled a little bit more in the decision-making side of the franchise, there's at least like indicators that, okay, this could turn around. But the team building stuff.
The exception probably being like Malik Williams is the one that I still I don't, sorry Malik, if you're listening, it's the one I still don't really understand. But
that was crazy. He had a really tough go of it, really tough. But God bless him. So the thing I want to talk about before we get out of here is the team building aspect of the Raptors. From what I can tell, you have, especially in Emmanuel, Jacoby, and Grady, these are similar guys in one sense. Is like there's a lot of motion in pursuing their jumpers. That's fun. That's good. That is supposed to be what a wing-led team or like forward-led team is meant to have, especially if you don't have that objective, like calcified in everybody's mind lead point guard. Emmanuel quickly isn't there yet. Perhaps he will be someday. What do you make of the team that it seems they're trying to build under Darko?
Yeah, I mean, I like it. First of all, I think it fits the identity and the style that they tried to play last year. Naturally, when you sign a rookie to, or not a rookie, but a guy on his rookie deal to a max extension, you're looking at least some things through the lens of how do they fit with Scotty. I think certainly what we've learned from what they've prioritized is that they agree with us that Scotty is probably better suited or more valuable to them guarding in the lower half of the floor and being more of a four defensively. I think that that priority on kind of guys who at least have the potential to be perimeter defenders and point of attack defenders. I don't know if you feel similarly. That signaled to me at least a little bit. They'd like Scotty guarding up higher positions. Offensively, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, when they made that change, I was like, and then he was sniffing around all defense candidacy. I was like, you'd have to be a jackass to move away from this, I think.
Yeah, I mean, but like there's also like some teams and some coaches and some players are just like, hey, our best player should guard the other team's best guy. Like and I still think there will be opportunities to challenge him to do that just for his defensive growth. Like, sure. Okay, it's a Giannis game. Let's see it. Okay, it's a Luka game. Let's not stick with it all game, but let's try a couple possessions. He
might not even be bad for Luka, right? Because they're probably going to run a lot of blitz packages. So the longer arms at the blitz creates different passing angles.
And Luka's struggled the most with like strong, like he said, Lou Dort is the hardest guy for him to score on. Like that, like a strong base guy.
Fire hydrant.
Maybe beat him to the spot and be strong in that spot rather than trying to live in his jersey. Which I think is, something that Scotty could be good at. So that's my thought defensively. Offensively, yeah, I think, I don't know, if like they watch the same games we do, they probably just got tired of like the lack of offensive dynamism. And like these guys are not, there yet. Like it's going to take some growing pains. Like it wouldn't shock me if Jacoby Walter has like the low won't be as low, but like a similar season to Grady Dick, where like it takes about half a season to get to where you can figure out where to get your shots and you're strong enough to get to your shots and stuff like that. But like prioritizing that, I don't know. It's important. Like shooting is great, but it's way more valuable to build motion shooting that's harder to guard into your offense than it is just like stationary corner shooting, especially like corner threes are still really valuable, but defensively in the NBA, we have figured out the geometry horizontally, right? Like we know what to do with corner 3-point shooters. We know there are guys in the corner who are good shooters. Every defense assumes a good shooter in the corner already. What we don't have yet, like where offense maybe has a chance to move ahead, is a lot more of that up the floor dynamic space creation and things like that. So I think it just makes sense with where we are, like geometry wise defensively to kind of push the envelope on that offensive skill set.
I also think that defense is a lot of how they build out defense is built around the corner, either pulling from it when they can or protecting it when they can't. And guys are in the same way that the post up has become retrofitted, not necessarily as the scoring hub, but as like the preeminent playmaking hub, and something that I think Scotty will be able to utilize tremendously, be it high or low or mid, whatever. There is a lot of room to make teams pay for their lack of, I guess, technicality defensively above the break. We see it in the end. We saw it in the NBA finals. We saw it throughout the NBA playoffs, is that like teams are really, really careful about what they're doing along the baseline. And especially so since people started using guards as like dunker spot spacers, right? Less than desirable shooting guards. But as far as like a lot of the actions run above the break, it's not just getting that 3-point shot. It's about playing out of continuation when the, like, be it if you're switching, if you're going to be playing like, well, if you're going to next things, the stuff above the break is not as crisp typically as it is elsewhere. And there's lots of room for creative guards and creative wings to play around in that space. It's also why Naz Reid kind of popped the hell off, I think, too.
Dude, I watched I was wondering if that was coming from your end or my end, the stomping upstairs. Yeah.
They're going nuts. Yeah, but anyway.
Thunderstorm. Yeah, I mean, even like, this is like, overly simplified example of that, but like I watched the Greece-Croatia game earlier, and like Greece just spammed Nick Calathes, Giannis pick and rolls just to get Giannis like a little bit of a head of steam. And obviously that's a smaller floor, and Giannis is Giannis. But like you think about ways for Scotty to expand his one-on-one attacking, like playing off of those things, whether it's DHO or him initiating or just as a screen setter and breaking off in different ways. Like, I don't know. There's a team, like you said, teams are not as sharp defending vertically, I guess is the way to say it, as they are horizontally, you know?
Yeah. It's something that teams will have to consider for a long time, and that's why Steph Curry, despite, in my opinion, not being a better player than LeBron James, changed a lot more in short order than LeBron James did. Because LeBron did change the game horizontally. His skip pass, and especially how often he did it, changed the way defenses guarded at the bottom end.
2016 Eastern Conference Finals, LeBron and bench unit, 13 consecutive possessions running the corner offense with LeBron just pinging out guys. It's burned into my memory.
It's really impressive, but Steph being able to stretch the floor in other ways and create like, or even let's say like Kyle Lowry and Pascal Siakam, the game-winning shot in Game 6 is because Golden State had to guard so far up the floor in a pick and like just a brush screen between Pascal and Kyle. It's something that obviously teams should be paying attention to. And the Raptors, they've figured out, at least with Darko, that they're comfortable having a stationary hub, putting Jakob right there and pinging guys around the floor, having the ball do a lot of the work and having players do a lot of the work. And there is a change when it comes to Scotty, who lets the ball do a lot of the work that he wants to. Jakob Poeltl lets the ball do a lot of the work that he wants to. And Grady, Emmanuel, and Jacoby are three guys who will have the foot speed and the dynamism to sprint into a bunch of different shots. And in the middle of that too is RJ, who will see all of that motion and punch directly into the middle of it. And I think that's probably not what the team looks like when they're at their best. The names aren't going to be exactly the same, I reckon. But what they're building is, I think, a very, very modern offense. And it's something that should be, at least for people who have to watch every game, even when they lose 15 straight, it should be fun to watch.
Yeah, like, yeah, this is part of why the Raptors early in the season, like in addition, every one of us had to write or do the podcast or show segment on like, why don't they change the starting lineup just to try something different? They were also just playing like an aesthetically displeasing style of basketball. And I know that they were trying to build all those things that it would eventually become, but they were so slow at it. And they like didn't take good advantage of the opportunities it created and stuff. And like, even like back to the post Tampa tank season where they went to the first round and played against Philly, like that team was good. And, you know, Masai is probably some degree of accurate in being like, I still don't understand why that team didn't get better the next year and things like that, since that lineup of guys now makes $10 bajillion a season combined. But that was like also not a pretty form of basketball. Like that was, we're going to run in transition and we're going to just like grind everything out on the offensive end. So it'll be a little fun in that regard. And it's like more for us to break down and learn too.
I have a bit of a hot take, and it's not, I don't mean to say that this is the path they should have gone down, because having a top 6 team in like what was a weaker East probably isn't, it still doesn't net you anything besides like some playoff games and some playoff revenue. But if they had run it back with Fred, I think they probably would have been a top 6 team. I think they would have won between 46 and 50 games. Like,
yeah. And who
but
knows,
they would have been a contender cost at that. Yeah.
And that's like, this is like a part of my issue with the Jakob Poeltl trade over time has been like, and we don't need to redo this too much, but like the trade, like, I didn't agree with the timing and the cost and things like that. I love Jakob. Even the explanation only makes sense in the scenario where you keep the pick and roll point guard who could shoot threes, and then everything makes a little bit more sense. Even if there still would have been like, you know, spacing concerns sometimes and stuff like that. But the Jakob and Fred thing to me were like very connected. It's like, why have one, have 0 or 2? Anyway.
That trade serviced one player above all else on the Raptors. This is Fred VanVleet. And then
That's what I'm
Fred
saying.
and then Fred got offered over $40
Yeah,
million.
you can't pay him $45 million
No,
or whatever it
no,
ended
you
up
can't.
being, but it's
Like, they
and this
could
is
have,
another thing is
but you
like,
don't.
do they keep that together if like James Harden actually goes to Houston as like people thought in February of that year, right? Like everyone kind of thought that was like predestined to happen, not the
Yeah.
Clippers thing. And then like, is Daryl Morey being an alleged liar what actually kept Fred VanVleet from staying in Toronto when you go down like 4 butterfly effects,
Yeah, it would have been interesting. Cosmo says here they paid quickly the FVV money. Honestly, they didn't even. That's how much Fred was going to get paid. What was it? 36, like
Yeah.
36 million per year starting last season.
Yeah.
That's
And like quickly is younger, and this contract will span like a younger part of his peak and also in a higher cap environment.
yeah.
So that's not to necessarily justify the full cost on the quickly deal. You can feel however you want about where the exact number got to, but in relative terms, it's for like a closer to peak part in a higher cap environment. So
Yeah.
in relative terms, it's even less.
Yeah, I'll say quickly the thing I said. I'll say expeditiously the thing about quickly that I said the last podcast. He's making like 20.8% of the cap first season of this. That'll be descending, I think, like 20.8, 21% of the cap next season. And that'll be descending. The big difference is that the Raptors, so many of the extensions or contracts that we've seen them sign have been like steals. OG's was an unbelievable steal. Pascal's was a little bit like, oh, I wonder if this, but then he scored 40 the first game of the contract and made all NBA the first year. Fred, basically every contract he signed with the Raptors ended up being like really, really good. IQ is more so in that Pascal territory. It's similar at what age he signed it. It's similar, like it's not as expensive, but it wasn't in the context of a contending team who needed to pay with bird rights. Like there's a bunch of different stuff that goes into it, but quickly they're paying him to be better than he was last year. And he's not a 22-year-old, he's a 25-year-old. And that could be really good because, as you said, getting a guy on 5 years from 25 to 30 at like this, we know what we're paying him. If he pops the hell off, then you're looking at something really, really good. But also, they traded for him. And I think you can do the sunk cost fallacy idea with Bruce Brown, but it's not a sunk cost fallacy with Quickly.
No, I mean, you traded knowing he was an RFA and you were going to pay him, like, I don't know. We knew roughly. What was the rumor? He turned
like
down the Devin
26
Vassell deal. Yeah. I think when I ran my cap explainer thing, it had 27 million in there. Yeah, that was before we got the exact numbers on the new TV deal. So maybe, but again, like that doesn't kick in yet. So it's a big number. It's bigger than I expected, which is like, it's funny how these things work. And this is a little just like inside Twitter or whatever, but like I tweet out when that happens, like, that's a little bit more than I expected. Reasonable bet, but more than I expected it to be. And then some people took that as like a full justification, and some people took it as like a full trashing of the contract. I'm like, I just said it was a little bit more than I thought it would be. Like I had it as 27 and it came in at 35. It doesn't, I don't know. But like you said, like you're paying for development that hasn't happened yet. Yes. And that is a little bit risky, but if you believe in the player, probably turns out fine by year 5.
Yeah. And that was kind of what, Lewis was doing the Overton window analysis. He was like, obviously the Raptors think that Quickly is better than we do. And honestly, if the NBA, whether you're listening to this and you think, oh, Samson knows a lot about basketball, probably true. You got to trust the Raptors brass over me in most cases, I would think, as far as like player analysis, because they got a lot more tools at their disposal. Outside of the Quickly stuff, Scotty's a home run. I do kind of want to talk about like the Davion Mitchell, Jamal Shed. The Raptors seem to be looking at the thing that some of us have been looking at and saying, like, is Quickly sustainable to guard point guards, or what are you doing with that situation? I'm curious what you make about like the backcourt situation as far as it pertains to Quickly, Jacoby, Grady, Davion, like that whole situation, I suppose.
Yeah, I think, look, there are a couple things. Like, I think when he's on the floor, Davion Mitchell is guarding the best guard on the floor. Like, I don't think
of course.
you don't get Davion Mitchell without that intent. You don't have the nickname Off Night without being that kind of guy. And you know how I feel about defense first point guards who have no
He's your
offensive
guy.
package.
He and Jamal.
He's like, this is my redo on Chris Dunn. The Raptors never gave me the Chris Dunn reclamation story that ended up being correct. So they're gonna do it with Davion Mitchell instead. I don't know. I like this kind of player. I don't say I like this kind of player to mean like, oh, you have to have a no shooting defense first guard to win an NBA championship. Like, that's not true. And I would love for that 36% on small sample of threes last year to be true for Davion Mitchell, even though I don't think it is. He's guarding the best guard when he's on the court. I don't know how much Jamal Shedd's going to play initially. Like, even though he's on a proper NBA contract, I'd imagine he'll get some 905 time. Probably slots in at third on the point guard depth chart for now. Jacoby is someone who you could see taking on some of those reps. I think he's probably going to have to get stronger, just given the amount of pick and roll teams will run him through. Like, he's going to, even if he's good at it at the college level and like has good instincts and stuff like that, like, he's going to struggle with screen navigation and not getting knocked off his spots and stuff like that to start. So I think it's important to have options. And then I think maybe, I think more to the point you're getting at, there is a little bit of, not a bet, but like a little bit of insulation against the idea that Immanuel Quickley is a really, really good team level defender, but maybe isn't going to be the point of attack level defender that we were kind of projecting forward from New York. Do you know what I mean? Like he's got all the team side stuff, ball hawk stuff, help him recover stuff, X out, opportunistic stuff, and transition, which is like, that's fun stuff too. But one of the questions was like, can he do it one-on-one?
Yeah. What I would like to see more than anything is actually, I think the Quickley stuff was maybe given too fast to him, because
the responsibility or the reputation?
The reputation, especially because he was considered not a super, like a star guard stopper, but he was considered a plus defender, and objectively so, I think, by almost everybody I talked to. But once you take him, the Knicks' defensive environment is very cozy, like very, very cozy. And especially for a guy like Immanuel Quickley, they're big. They do shrink the floor. It is a lot more hospitable for a small guard to kind of be like the off the beaten path. Like, I'm a playmaker. I'm kind of off ball. I disrupt things. On the Raptors, he's being asked to guard more actions on ball, and he's also being asked to like take up more space off ball. It isn't a guarantee. I don't think either is a guarantee. It's a proving ground, but I do really like, because Immanuel, and I'll be quick, Immanuel has the skill set and lack of necessity to have the ball in his hands to just slide very quickly to the two and allow for some funky lineups that get you through the middle parts of the game.
And it's worth noting that the Raptors, like they're small. They're a small team. Again, unless something changes between now and opening day, which it very well could, they're going to be a smaller team. Like, Bruce Brown is going to see some time at the 4. Scotty Barnes might still see some time at the 5, and if not, Kelly Olynyk's going to be in there as a 5. And Kelly's a 5 in the Raptors' offensive system, but not a naturally.
He had a lot of
little
trouble
bit more
last year. Defensively.
Yeah. So they're small, and that's going to lead to some funky lineups. And I wonder too if it ends up where, because they have Shed and Davion and Jacoby and even Bruce Brown, does Quickley get challenged with, can you guard up a position then if you want to be off the ball a little bit more, if we want to use you off the ball a little bit more? The risk of that is like, hey, if we put you on a 3 so that you can be off the ball and be a bit of a chaotic disruptor guy, if they funnel that ball to him to take advantage of that mismatch, can you handle it? And he's not, he's another guy who needs to add strength. The weightlifting coach is the most important person for the Raptors this offseason.
Yeah. They got to get big. That is what I'm one of the like pet projects to analyze this season will be like, what are the Davion plus Immanuel lineups? How do they do? How does that look? And also, something that was asked a couple times, is Grady going to start on this team?
Yeah.
I think he starts, which is
you go really Quickley, Grady, RJ, Scotty, Jakob.
Yes, which is really nasty and gross defensively. Like, it's really bad. However, I think you get to start doing a lot of fun stuff on offense, and you go with that. And as you said, like, maybe the weight training is going swimmingly, and guys
Yeah.
are big and huge.
Yeah. Get real jacked. Get do some rock
You
climbing.
you and I are currently trying to do that right now. We're trying to get it's you know what it is? It's because we're trying to get a roster spot on the
Yeah.
Raptors. But I'll ask you a quick thing too, because this is what I did before. Davion is a player who, if you had asked many people in the NBA, like, they're not interested in him playing on their team. They think like, oh, this guy's a bust. He can't do anything. However, when I asked Trey was like, I like taking a look at Davion. When I asked S, he said, I like taking a look at Davion. When I asked Lewis was like, I like Davion. I like Davion. Are we missing something? And this was like, I would have said this before. It's not just because he's a Raptor, and I expect the same from the rest of the guys asked.
Yeah. Look, I think part of it is when a guy has the bus reputation, that sticks with him a little bit. He also he makes a good amount of money. So if you fire up Spotrac or whatever, you see he's making like 7 million. But I think this is reasonable. I think the other thing that maybe colors it for people too is I call them redraft candidates, right?
Yes.
Or some people call them second draft candidates. Like, okay, this guy didn't work out as a rookie. Maybe that's a developmental thing. Maybe this guy just needed more time. Let's take a cheaper, Davion Mitchell did not cost the Raptors the number 9 overall pick.
Mhm.
It cost the Raptors a little bit of cap flexibility and the most hated Raptor of all time that I've covered the team. In Jalen McDaniels. I think you have to go back to John Salmons the last time I saw people talk this much smack. Like, universally, nobody liked one guy. To where I would feel bad about it, and then I'd see him hit the floor, and I'd be like, "Oh,
who was actually playing?" Yeah, because
yeah.
Goran found his way to it.
Yeah.
Terrence Davis obviously found his way to it. However, Jalen is just playing basketball.
Yeah. Anyway, this is if you have a good pro scouting department, this is the kind of thing you're supposed to do. And I get it. It didn't work out with Stanley Johnson. They probably got more out of Stanley Johnson than anyone other than the Lakers did still. But it didn't work out there. Okay. But this is it's an interesting debate philosophically, because what some people would tell you, and a criticism of Stanley Johnson was, well, he played at a major college program and he has played 5,000 NBA minutes because he was a high pick and got given tons of opportunities. There is so much sample that says Stanley Johnson is not an NBA rotation caliber player. And that's a reasonable argument. And that is an argument some people might say for Davion Mitchell, right? He's played 4,600 minutes in the NBA at this point, plus some playoff time. And he did 2 years at Baylor and another at Auburn. So there is a lot of tape on Davion Mitchell. There is a lot of evidence that Davion Mitchell so far, can't stick other than on the fringes of an NBA rotation. But the thought with Stanley Johnson, the thought with Davion Mitchell, et cetera, was there's something there that made that guy the number 4 pick, the number 8 pick, the number 9 pick. Someone thought highly enough of them. And if you're the Raptors and you intend to be good for a long time, you're never again after 2025 in an ideal scenario getting a top 10 pick. So how do you get a top 10 talent in? Well, sometimes you find that guy at 27 or undrafted or something like that. But sometimes you take a bet that developmentally you can get more out of a guy than another team did. They did it with Malachi Richardson too. And that was more of a tax dump, but it was a similar logic. Maybe we could get more out of this guy. And that's a consistent bet against Sacramento's player development, by the way. They keep trying Sacramento Kings guys and Detroit Pistons guys. So anyway, that's the logic. I like it for Davion because one of the things that I like about Davion as a flyer like this, and again, it didn't cost them the number 9 pick. It cost them a little bit of cap flexibility, and they picked up 2 second-round picks for their trouble. He has one NBA skill that can put him on the floor in some situations, and that's an easier guy to keep giving minutes to and trying to figure out, right? However shaky he can be offensively, he can guard point of attack at an NBA level, no question. So when a guy has that one skill to build on, I think it's a reasonable flyer. And if it doesn't work, you let him go as an RFA. It's not that big a deal.
Cosmo brings up a good point. He says he or she says, if Ochai proves he can shoot, then he might start over Grady. I think Ochai is the one who makes sense. Jacoby, I really don't see it. It's tough to see anybody else really popping off, but Ochai allows quickly to play off ball, off the main, like most main guards defensively. He's very no frills offensively. He cuts well. He just hasn't finished well.
He
hasn't
also
shot well.
They become a really interesting transition team with Ochai in that lineup as well, where like RJ's so good in transition, Scotty's good in transition, and Ochai runs the floor better than just about anyone both ways. I think my read from Twitter and from your stuff and Lewis's stuff, I think I'm a little lower on Ochai than like the average in the Raptors sphere. So I don't know. Like I think this summer for him is like I think he's playing to get that team option picked up, rather than getting made a 3-year free agent. Like I don't. What he showed us last year, like that wasn't a great environment, etc. And I like the defensive potential still. But to me, he's a pretty clear. I guess for fit, you could put him in there for defense, but like he's a step or two away. For me, like he was a huge net negative offensively last year.
Yeah, it hurt a lot. What is it? The transitive property is like, well, somebody like Ochai, somebody like Davion, Leo Getz and James Welch both questioning if Ochai will be a shooter. It's of course we watched this guy shoot 22%. However, he has like an insane amount of volume from college. It went mediocre in his time with Utah, and sometimes guys, they turn their jumper around. However, like Delano, I don't think was like as pure a swing skill shooter guy as Ochai is. Ochai has a lot of stuff in place that if he just hits jumpers and easy jumpers that fall into his hands, suddenly like that's a guy who it's not playoff rotation, I don't think, but that's a guy who, you're finding minutes on the back end of teams in the NBA. However, yeah, you got to hit shots before anybody talks about you like you hit shots,
Yeah, it was a tiny sample too, but he wasn't a good shooter in the G League, and like I think he was fine at summer league, but like nothing crazy.
Yeah, there's just
I don't know. They're all small samples. But the other thing too, is like when you're comparing his shooting numbers to other guys, is like his diet of shots is also the easiest possible diet of shots you can get. It's stationary open corner threes. So like, even if that got to like 36, 37%, we'll call it the Tony Allen line, right? Where like you can hit enough of them to stay on the floor, because if you hit below that line, like you're playing 4-on-5, you just give it up too much. Or, Tony Allen was insane defensively. Maybe you want to call it the Andre Roberson line or something like that. And then you got to factor in the cutting. I don't know. But like, it's also not as if like him becoming a 37% 3-point shooter means he's a good 3-point shooter.
Correct.
Because like he's not going to hit anything above the break or off motion or anything like that, I don't think, unless like this becomes like the greatest 3-point shooting development season.
When I was looking at Grady and kind of detailing all of his movement shooting, if Grady shoots 35% on his diet of like a lot of motion, it allows the Raptors to move through a bunch of set actions. It pulls and teases the defense a bunch of different ways. He could shoot like 34, 35%, and it would be more valuable than Ochai's diet at like 41 or 42. It's just way more valuable. And the big thing was Ochai, in addition to that, and this is why I love Mobo, especially playing in how the Raptors, their screening actions above the breaks, they use them as opportunities to seal, catch on the move, back cut. Mobo should be really great there, just as a quick thing. But like Ochai was 1 of 22 on short mid-range shots last season. He was 60% at the rim, and his shot chart was easy everywhere, and he didn't convert anywhere, like 4% from the short mid-range, and like not a lot of passing reads out of those like short roll situations. So I'll be very interested if he can shoot. As I can't remember who said it. I think it was James said, Samson, teams don't win on ifs. That's correct. Nobody's winning on those.
But this is an if season, right? Like this is the season to tease out all those ifs.
You might as well try things out. Also, Slomo asked if Ochai is in Summer League. Yes, he is. We talked about that earlier, though. I think we've come probably towards the end of the podcast. Is there anything that's on your mind that you want to say before we get out of here?
I mean, my main thing was the Bruce Brown thing off the top, and I know I gave a long, rambly answer, but it's funny, man. Like doing this job, like a part of the job is, whether it's X's and O's or whether it's the front office side of things, it's to try to understand what the team is thinking and explain that to people. And sometimes those explanations can come off like justifications, right? Like you believe that necessarily. And it's been hard, like the valuing flexibility, the patience with assets and things like that. I hate talking about players like that, but let's be honest, they acquired Bruce Brown as Bruce Brown, the trade asset, not Bruce Brown, the basketball player. I don't like talking about guys that way. And it's hard to explain the front office's thinking and understand the front office's thinking while also getting across that I don't particularly agree with this move. So I don't know, especially like I feel this more on the baseball side because like obviously everyone hates Ross Atkins.
That's a transaction sport, man.
Yeah, and everyone hates Ross Atkins. And like
I listened to the podcast. I've heard you bemoan this point before. You're like,
yeah,
God damn.
like I lean analytically, obviously, and I'm going to explain to you what the team is trying to do, but that doesn't mean I agree with it. And it doesn't, like, analytics is not like a binary thing. You can have good ones and bad ones, or good ones that are applied well, good ones that are applied poorly. And like Atkins has ruined all the work I did making analytics sexy. So I don't know. Maybe I'm projecting from baseball into this, but yeah, Bruce Brown thing's been a little frustrating, and like, I hope I'm wrong. I hope there's a deal that materializes and they can be opportunistic between now and the trade deadline. But I do, like, right now, looking at who is still available and the prices some other guys signed for, I'm sitting here wondering, like, would you have been better off taking a second Davion Mitchell type flyer on a guy who, whether free agency or trade or something, on a guy who might be something versus a guy who and you're hoping to turn into, another if.
Yeah, I think to keep like one more minute of inside baseball talk, I think especially with doing the live chat and being so familiar with the names I see, I think that the way people convey is usually good enough. I think it's mostly dependent on who's receiving that. Like some people are just like, you said that word, like you mean that within your heart of hearts, instead of you just being like, well, this is the reason why this would happen. I think it's just some people, how they ingest information is very different. A couple quick things. The first thing is asked from, who was it? Oh yeah, Lewis asks about who's the best Raptor media Frisbee player. It's you, Lewis. Goose asks if John Cena is the GOAT wrestler. Is that?
He's not the GOAT. He's in the conversation. Like he's a
Trey
Mount
said a guy burst into tears next to him when they announced it.
Dude, it was a fun surprise, man. That's like he's not the GOAT, but he's like a inner circle, unquestioned Hall of Famer, probably on most people's Mount Rushmore. He has a little bit of a weird, like the top guy for, like he was the top guy in what's generally considered the worst era of wrestling. So like, how do you contextualize that, right? Like this is Babe Ruth playing only against white players.
Yeah,
it's like, well, the league was kind of weak at that time. No, he's not my GOAT, but he is. He's on the Mount Rushmore, and it'll be cool. So for anyone who doesn't know, he came out in Toronto and was like, "I've always loved Toronto. Like the crowds are always great. I thought I should do this here. 2025 is his retirement year. So we don't know when exactly, but he's done after 2025." And he hasn't been around for the last couple years very much. So it was cool to be there for that. Little do you know, Trey was the one who was crying.
Yeah.
Some guy burst out crying. Yeah. His tears got all over my face.
Hey, doctor, my friend is having this problem. Yeah, that's the one. Did Springer, or what happened on TV?
The Jays just went ahead in the extras. Dalton Varsho singled in Vlad in the 10th. So
hell yeah. Who would you bring to a pup concert from the Raptors guards or from the Raptor squad?
Huh. So anyone on the team?
Sure.
Okay. That's a very tough one.
Scotty could rage. I feel like, yeah.
Scotty, actually, we know Scotty's a Paramore fan, so we're not too far off musically. My head went to like, who could I see mucking stuff up in the pit? And I went to Jamal Shed. I was just like, yeah, this guy, this guy will throw down for sure. Scotty's a good answer musically. No Ochai, he would be too tall and like too strong. I guess that would be the case for Scotty too, but Scotty would be like into it more, I think. So
yeah.
I think Jamal Shed could throw down in the pit.
Oh, I forgot to say, So you brought me on Blue Jays talk the day of the draft last year, and I
Mhm.
called the shot. I said Grady, and they picked Grady. And you didn't get me on for the second round of the draft where I got both Mobo and Chomsky.
Yeah,
Big miss.
I know. I'm sorry. It's been so it's always like it's a little weird to navigate how much Jays stuff or how much like Raptor stuff I could do or wrestling
Right.
stuff or whatever. Um, and yeah, I think Eric Kareen got the nod the day before the draft,
And
but part of it was like he had just done like a huge ranting thread about the Blue Jays. Um,
I would offer very little about the Blue Jays this year.
yeah,
I wouldn't have been a good guest at all. That's the big problem.
it's also yeah, it was I don't know. I can't remember. I had a reason for anyway. I
Yeah.
apologize for not letting you
No,
come
no, no,
on
no.
and call
This
your
this
shot.
was meant in jest. We're not supposed
Yeah.
to actually dive into it. But yeah, that's about it. I think we've covered the I guess the Raptors and some of the wrestling stuff that was being discussed. How do you feel about that as a podcast? Savvy?
Yeah, yeah, it's good, man. Yeah,
Oh yeah.
we can yeah.
We'll
We could do
wrap
more
up.
questions if you want, but I'm good to go watch the bottom of the 10th inning here as well.
Go watch the bottom of the 10th. I'm gonna go buy some groceries, I think, and then Oleg and I are gonna watch True Detective. Oh,
That wait
actually, House of the Dragon.
oh, okay. House of the Dragon, I don't know. Are you guys like just starting True Detective?
Yeah, he hasn't seen it, and
You have.
McConaughey and Harrelson season 1. Yeah, lock
Yeah.
in. Yeah,
Yeah.
so
I can't wait for you guys. I don't know if you put them on TikTok or you just put them on Instagram story, but you guys reenacting the key scenes as Harrelson and McConaughey. You're obviously Harrelson for
yeah,
the lack of Harrelson.
sure.
Yeah, but so we'll see if Alec can do the McConaughey accent.
Yeah, don't have TikTok for what it's worth. Okay, everybody, 220 people in the chat. Make sure to like it. Hopefully there's 220 likes by the time we leave this thing. It actually helps promote the podcast after it's done being live. It gives it more of a shelf life. I'll be back on Confederacy of Dunks after, I think, on Tuesday, and obviously we'll talk about all the stuff that's happening tomorrow, albeit the Masai, quickly, Scotty, etc. stuff. So all that good stuff. Thank you to everybody for listening. Blake, thank you so much for coming on. And whether you got into this in the morning or at night, have a blessed day and goodbye. We got a podcast.